Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And we are going to be looking at the topic, the agenda to reduce Africa's population, who benefits. And today we're going to be looking at this very controversial topic. And we don't want to here come with one-sided perspective, or one-sided perspective. We want to analyze this subject, this topic, as objectively as we can. Now, Africa is projected to become an increasingly important demographic force in the world. So, when powerful institutions invest heavily in reducing birth rates, promoting family planning, and shaping reproductive policies, should we simply accept the stated intentions, or should we also ask who benefits from a smaller Africa? Some important questions that we'll explore are concerns about Africa's rapid population growth influencing international development policies. What role do family planning and reproductive health programs play? And who funds these programs? And what are their stated objectives? Where is the line between voluntary family planning and outside pressure? Why do some African leaders and commentators view population control policies with suspicion? Could demographic change affect Africa's economic failure, labor, or natural resources and geopolitical influence? Who benefits if Africa's population growth slows dramatically, and who might lose? These are the questions that we have to ask ourselves. Now, the agenda to reduce Africa's population, who is benefiting from this agenda? This afternoon, we're asking a question that is controversial, and I know that, uncomfortable, and perhaps more important than many people realize. Is there an agenda to reduce Africa's population? And if so, who benefits? Africa is home to the world's youngest and fastest growing population. By the middle of this century, the continent will contain an enormous share of the world's young people, workers, consumers, and future leaders. At the same time, Africa possesses some of the planet's most valuable natural resources. So here is the question we must ask. When powerful governments, international organizations, foundations, and development agencies invest heavily in family planning, reproductive health, and programs designed to reduce birth controls or birth rates, should Africans simply accept the stated objectives, or should they also examine the policies, the history, the funding, and the interest behind them? Now, let me be clear from the beginning. Asking questions is not the same as claiming that every family planning program is part of a secret conspiracy. People have legitimate reasons for supporting voluntary contraception and reproductive health. But history teaches us that the powerful nations and institutions have sometimes tried to influence the population resources and political figures or futures of other societies. So tonight we are going to examine the evidence, the arguments, and the concerns. Why is Africa's population such an important geopolitical issue? Who wants Africa's birth rates to decline? What are their stated reasons? Are there economic or political interests involved? And perhaps the biggest question of all, who benefits? I have several video clips to share tonight, and I want us to watch them carefully, not simply to agree or disagree, but to think critically about what is being said. Africa's population is growing. Africa's influence is potentially growing. Africa's resources remain enormously valuable. And whenever powerful people take a particular interest in the future size of population, I believe Africans and all of us have a right to ask questions. So let's begin now our series or discussion, and I welcome you, cordially to our live session this afternoon. Now, we're going to be looking at some clips here of what people are saying, what the powers that be are saying about Africa, because we must analyze exactly what they are saying. Now, let's look at the World Economic Forum and what they're saying about Africa. We know the World Economic Forum plays a very interesting role, important role in what happens in our world in terms of
is here at the Economic Forum. I think there was a sense of relief, actually, in your frankness. You brought up some issues that others are reluctant to bring up.
Always. All the religious groups are against me because I'm talking about population. They want more souls, I want less on the planet. We can take it upon ourselves that we will not push the human population. You can have a dog. I am not saying children are bad, they are wonderful, but it's just too many. We as human beings, we are wonderful, but we are too many. We are so many that the insect population is going down. No, it's not a joke, it's very threatening. If the insect population disappears, the planet will be destroyed. Yes, the worms disappear, the planet will be destroyed. If you and me disappear, planet will flourish. I'm thinking of something very audacious for which I'll become super unpopular. I'm thinking of instituting an award for all those young women who are healthy, who are capable of having a child, but choose not to have one.
Oh, you got a good endorsement.
Because whether you realize this today or not, you think the problem is parking, you think the problem is garbage, you think the problem is healthcare. No, the problem is population. There is no other problem.
No, he's very clear that the people of the world, right, are the problem. It's not about the environment as they're telling you about, right? It's about you, right? You are the one that, and me, of course, we are the enemies and they've got to get rid of us, because that is the whole matter of population control. That if they get rid of us, the people, then the environment will flourish. Then the world, the planet itself will flourish. It won't flourish by having people and increase of population here on this planet. And he's very clear. And notice he's at the World Economic Forum, right? So if we think we're taking him, oh, this guy is just crazy and he's just talking some crazy stuff, then we must understand that that is much more than so. But let us go into the weeds of the matter in terms of this whole concept of population control and the plan to reduce Africa population. So let's get with the depopulation in Africa and Bill Gates. We want to see what Bill Gates is suggesting, and we know that he was responsible a lot for the vaccines that we had in recent
policy of the American government is called the Kissinger Report, which was produced in the mid-70s when Henry Kissinger was involved with the government. And it explicitly states, which to this day, it remains the official policy of the American government. It has not changed. Mm-hmm. May not be implemented by Trump, but it remains the same. That the purpose of the foreign policy in Africa was to reduce the population. So to give aid to countries in Africa, not clean water and schooling and things like that, but contraception and abortion, in order to shrink the population of Africa, because they have great mineral resources there.
That sounds diabolical.
It is, yes.
That sounds like something conceived in the mind of Margaret Sanger.
Yeah, definitely. And so at the time, Kissinger and those involved with the Carter administration wanted to shrink the population, make sure that the Africans do not develop and do not use the resources for themselves, because we in the States, we need them. There is a concerted effort of foreign powers to control the population of Africa. Africa is a huge continent, could feed thousands more people, but the policies of the West, especially in Europe. For example, between 1990 and the year 2000, the United States, Canada, and Europe contributed about $6 billion in contraceptives, not to help the people, not to give clean water, clean food. That is
not to fight malaria, for example.
No, of course, perish the thought, never. Let them die. That's the whole idea. So in our work in HLI, We denounced this reality to make the Africans aware that they have to defend themselves against the influence of foreign powers.
Is it just the United States, or do you believe that China is also playing a role in jockeying for the resources of Africa?
China is playing a major role because China is buying property in Africa. For example, in Mozambique, which is a Portuguese-speaking language country, they when Portugal was in charge of Mozambique, they used to export rice. Now they are importing rice from China because they cannot produce. The socialism has wrecked the production of rice. And the Chinese come and buy farms. So about almost a third of Mozambique belongs to China. So I was in other countries of Africa, the same reality. In South Africa, the Chinese are buying property, buying land in Africa.
So
and they send their own workers, the Chinese workers. They don't employ people over the place. They send their own workers to populate and to live in the place.
Okay, so it's not only a Western agenda, it seems to be that the entire world is against Africa, including the Chinese. That's why they're buying up land, as he's suggesting, and that's what they're doing. And they are actually controlling the resources because they understand that Africa is well populated, and that according to what they're saying here, UN data is suggesting here that UN projects that Africa's population will double by 2070. Today, Africa is home to 1.5 billion people, and by 2070, the United Nations expects this number to double. Its estimates range from 2.7 billion to 3.7 billion, with the most likely scenario placing the African population across or around 3.2 billion people. This region is where most of the growth in the world population will occur in the next 50 years. Europe's population, on the other hand, is already shrinking, and with Asia and Latin America expected to follow from the 2050s onwards, the UN expects North America's population to grow, although much slower than Africa's. Now, that is something rather interesting. So they want, in addition to controlling the resources, they also want to reduce, because it is a threat to them to see Africa thriving with such a population of people that they want to control, because their agenda is to reduce not only Africa's population, but the entire global population, and that's exactly what they are doing. Now, let's look at Africa sterilization and Africa depopulation, because we see here that a lot of the agenda, or what we're seeing in the world, we're seeing where they're going to Africa and they're saying they're vaccinating the people. But what's the broader agenda in light of the reproductive agenda, and also what they're saying that they're there to vaccinate them against certain diseases? Let's look at what this guy said.
Sterilization and population control. There's too many people on the planet we need to get rid of. In the words of Bill Gates, at least 3 billion people need to die. So we'll just start off in Africa. We'll start doing our research there, and we'll eliminate most of the Africans because they're deplorable. They're worthless. They're not part of this world economy. So they have their rights taken away, and they're suppressed, and they're experimented.
And the multilateral agencies and the health and regulatory so-called.
So what we're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, we're seeing where they're not even hiding the agenda anymore. The agenda is open in the air. They're telling us that this is what we're going to do. Nobody can stop us from doing it because this is the agenda. Years ago, these things would have been counted as conspiracy. People would say, no, that is not true, and that those are weird ideas. But we're seeing where some of the most influential people of the world are actually telling us that this clearly is the agenda, whether you like it or not. So we must pay attention. We must look carefully at what they are telling us about. Now, let us look at this guy here. Africa has to stay poor for other nations to be wealthy. So they're telling us that, and let me just say something before this person presents. We must understand that the economy is not built on those who are strong and weak. Well, yes, to a certain extent. But what they do, they steal from some countries for other countries to look to be stronger, formidable, more robust. And then they will tell you that you are inferior. But what have they done? What was the strategy? The strategy was actually human and economic theft. All right, and that's exactly what they're doing. Let's see what he's saying here.
Fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap.
Okay, so he's just suggesting that we have to make to steal the resources of Africa. We have to make Africa a very weak region economically, because without that, then Africa is going to grow, Africa is going to be prosperous. And in order for other countries to maintain their superiority, economic superiority, Africa has to be poor. We've got to maintain it as poor. And that's why we're seeing all of these major global powers like China, the United States, among others, France, and the others are joining in Africa, and they're divvying up the resources, right? The minerals and all of the wealth that Africa has, extracting the wealth so that they can always remain the rich ones. Now, it's interesting to note that we have here in the Caribbean, where our leaders, including Miss Mia Motley and Andrew Holness of Jamaica, who are suggesting that we should have Africans to come to the Caribbean. Now, are they seeking the richer ones? That's the question we need to ask. And do they want to have Africa just remain of its economically poor and then they depopulate them? Is that the real agenda? These are some very hard questions that we have to pose, because we don't know why in this time that they want to have lots of Africans come to the Caribbean. What really is the agenda? Because we know that their agenda is never pure. It's never well-intentioned. It's always a very negative and nefarious motive. And that is what we have to understand. But they're telling us what they're about to do and continue to do. If we are not taking stock, paying attention, then we are the ones who are going to die. Listen to what this guy is saying here, Chinese, is saying about how the ignorance in the world, people don't want to listen, so many of us are and will die because we're not taking attention.
Part of this escalatory plan requires depopulation, as you pointed out earlier. They do plan to kill a lot of people. And when I mean a lot of people, I mean like over 90% of humanity will be killed over the next 20 years, okay? That is part of the wider divine plan. And I think that most people who die will be because they refuse to wake up to reality, because they refuse to understand the larger picture in place. So I think one thing that's really important is for people to have the courage to admit that the world is changing, and to have the faith that things will turn out for the better. So basically, knowledge. Keep yourself informed. And that's why shows like yours is so important, right? Because during COVID, you were actually telling people the truth when most people didn't want to hear the truth. Okay, so most people who die will be because they lack the courage to see the truth for what it is. That's number one. Number two is.
Now, this is a very important piece of commentary that he has made, that the entire world, or most particularly those of us of African descent, we're so much invested in the sort of utopia of Africa rising. But what are we doing to raise Africa, to uplift it? many of us are not doing anything but talk, right? So we are saying that Africa is going to, in fact, rise again. But when we look at what is happening in the world and how they are pilfering and they are extracting the wealth from Africa and they are actually, dividing up Africa, we know that does not seem to be what is happening when we look at the reality. So we have to now look between what is real from what is unreal. Now, if we don't take the realities seriously, then how can Africa rise? If we think we don't know the enemies, right? And many of the people who are Pan-Africanists, they think that China, for example, is a good power and China is good for Africa. But as they're saying, there's no difference between what the US desires and what these other global powers want. They want to control and not necessarily to develop. And that is what we have to understand. But we have to begin to inform ourselves. And many of us who think we're informed are not very well informed. Now, there is Agenda 2030, and many people, we have discussed this agenda before, but this young man, this person is telling us about the Agenda 2030 and what the real agenda for Africa
Agenda 2025, Agenda 2030 is the same agenda that has existed since the 1600s. Africa should be maintained in a specific role for the benefit of Western hegemony. And that role is cheap extraction or even free extraction of raw materials, natural resources, and agricultural inputs, and maybe to a lesser extent, if there's any requirement for it, cheap labor. Labor doesn't necessarily mean compensated work. Labor can also be something like sex slaves. That's also a form of cheap labor. The same things that have been done to Africans for hundreds of years are what the same people are planning to do to Africans all over again. The only difference between then and now is that there exists some capacity for pushback due to the rise of Russia and China as strategic counterbalances, and the fact that the existence of Russia and China has given Africa the measure of relative freedom and economic growth that it manages to have right now. Because in case people are not aware of this, I will say this very, very clearly. The economic rise of China from absolute, poverty and being nowhere to becoming the largest economy in the world has coincided almost perfectly with the population explosion of Africa from under 500 million to being close to 2 billion today. That is not by accident. The two things have a very clear and direct link. Ditto, the change of Africa from being this completely colonized entity that had countries and towns and cities named after Europeans to being an entity that, even though it's still under some form of colonialism, at least has its own political, insignias, has its own flags, has indigenized to a certain extent, and Black people actually own land. That only exists because of the strategic existence of the USSR during the Cold War. If you watched the speech that was made by the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, a couple of days ago in Germany, he basically said very clearly that, look, for 400 years, the Western Empire was expanding. But from 1945, it started shrinking because of communism. He specifically said communism and anti-colonial uprisings made the Western Empire start shrinking. And he openly said that was a bad thing, and that with your help, the US and Europe, they want to recolonize, essentially, Africa and the global South because they think it's a good thing. He said, and I quote, "We need our partners to not be burdened by guilt or shame." He's saying the quiet part out loud. Basically, what has been done to Africa for all these hundreds of years was only a temporary reversal, a temporary pushback. And now the project of this Western Empire is how to strategically eliminate the threats of the USSR, of the threat of Russia and China, or if it cannot eliminate them, and it has to accept that those ones have their own sphere of influence that it cannot destroy, then how to make sure that it can grab as much of the so-called global South, i.e. Africa, as possible. And that is why you are seeing, the US setting up a military base in Nigeria now, US troops. It's very obvious what is happening. It's recolonization. It's the world being reconfigured, and some power blocks, which feel like they've been pushed out of the places that used to be their own, are trying to reestablish power bases in those places. And unfortunately, because in Nigeria we don't know our ass from our elbow, we're spreading our legs and letting them in. Like, yeah, you're coming to fight the terrorists for us.
You know, what is interesting is that when we look at Africa, we look at another country like Haiti, where these people are resilient, right? While they might be saying Africa is one of the poorest regions we have in the world, right? Yet the people are still procreating, they're having children, and they are well populated. So they're realizing that they can't use poverty against Haitians, they can't use poverty against Africans. So what do they have to do? They will have to up their philosophy and their actions and begin to what? To depopulate them, right? Whether it is through vaccines, through reproductive sort of policies, they will have to use subtleties in order to be able to suffocate the population and to eventually get rid of lots of them. Now, let me just say here, the agenda is not only to depopulate Africa, but Africa is the one that they are beginning with. That is going to be their central priority, the location from which they will use that population to get rid of others in the world in which we live. All right, so we have to be very careful about that. Now, let's look at what Bill Gates, there is something that Bill Gates is saying here. And when he talks, we have to listen because he is on board with such an agenda. Rapid population growth, and this is coming from the World Economic Forum, in some of Africa's poorest countries could put at risk future progress towards reducing global poverty and improving health, according to a report by the philanthropic foundation of Bill Gates. Now, demographic trends show 1 billion people have lifted themselves out of poverty in the last 20 years, the report found. But swiftly expanding populations, particularly in parts of Africa, could halt the decline in the number of extremely poor people in the world and may even start to rise. So we have population growth in Africa is a challenge, Gates told reporters in a telephone briefing about the report findings. So he's saying that it is a problem to have so many people in Africa. It found that poverty in Africa is increasingly concentrated in a few countries, which also have among the fastest growing populations in the world. By 2050, it projected more than 40% of the world's extremely poor people will live in just 2 countries, Democratic Republic of the Congo and Nigeria. Asked about the best ways of tackling the growing population and poverty challenge, Gates said improving access to birth control was key. So Bill Gates wants access to increased birth control, and this should be combined with investment in young people's health and education. The biggest things are the modern tools of contraception, Gates said. If you have those things available, then people have more control over being able to space their children. The report, entitled Goalkeepers, tracks 18 data points on United Nations development goals. So the fact of the matter, the United Nations is also on board, including child and maternal deaths, stunting, access to contraceptives, HIV, malaria, extreme poverty, financial inclusion, and sanitation. In its family planning section, the report called on policymakers to empower women to exercise the right to choose the number of children they have, when they have them, and with whom. According to a UN data, Africa is expected to account for more than half of the world's population growth between 2015 and 2050. Its population is projected to double by 2050 and could double again by 2100. Now, yet if women in sub-Saharan Africa were able to have the number of children she wanted, the projected population increase could be up to 30% smaller, said the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's annual Goalkeepers report. So what they're doing, they're using contraceptives and the reproductive health policies to control the population of Africa. Now, we're not suggesting here that some birth control might not be necessary. What we're saying that you have to look at the agenda Both truths can coexist, and we should fight against when they're overusing and overemphasizing reproductive health care rather than having people to have the children that they want to have if they can have them. Now, let's look at some other of what these people are saying, because we have to analyze what they're saying, because they are saying it, not me. And that is what you have to understand. Somebody here is looking at the LGBTQ is a strategy to depopulate Africa. So this is also another angle from which they're coming. They're using multiple angles, including healthcare and also sexual reproduction. So look at what he's
saying. Psychological warfare against Africa. They are trying to depopulate Africa with LGBTQ. They tried AIDS, it failed. They tried Ebola, it failed. They tried coronavirus, and it also failed because our immune system is different from the whites. We have the most strongest immune system than any race. Now, there's psychological warfare against Africans. The Europeans and Americans are telling us that LGBTQ is good, it's human right. Now, the question is, who set up these human right laws? They sit in their countries and they come out with laws and call it human right. Europeans are just 13% of the world population. They sit in their countries and pass laws and call it international laws. Who made that fucking laws? Why should 13% of the world make laws to control the rest of us? They call it human rights. They call it international laws. Who made it? That is the question I want Africans to ask ourselves. Now, let me show you how they are trying to depopulate us. Man and a man marrying, clearly time will come, our population is going to drop. As we see it in the Western world and, America, their population is not going up. Their population is reducing. Africa have the youngest population than any race because we marry up to 2, we marry 3, we marry 4. My grandfather married up to 8. Yes, this is African culture. He gave birth to many children. My father married more than 1. My father married 2. And probably I am going to marry more than 1. This is our culture. Me, if I get money, I'll marry up to 4. That is what I believe in. Polygamy is our culture, is our norms. Now they are telling us that 2 adults can meet and do whatever they want. But 3 adults or 4 adults cannot decide to be in a relationship. Use your brain, Africa. They are afraid that Africa or the black race will take over the world. Because looking at American population, they are declining. The West, their population is declining. But Africa, our population is going up. The Chinese, they don't marry and give birth as many as we do on the continent. The Americans don't do that. We do that. We marry, we give birth. It makes sense. These are our values. These are our cultures. Let's not allow these Americans and Europeans to dictate to us how we should live our lives. Who made these fucking international laws? Who made them? Africans, let us be smart.
Well, I'm not sure if you know that in recent times, what he's saying, some of what he says does make sense. Some of it do make sense, right? What we have to understand that culturally here in the West, the black people might be different, because how many of you believe in polygamy? Do you want to have your husbands and your wives be shared by many people? Do you? All right. And what determines that? That is his perspective. You might not agree and you might disagree. That's okay. But the fact that he's suggesting here, which he's correct, that the policies are controlled by the Western Hemisphere at the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, wherever they are, these multilateral agencies control the policies of Africa. So when we sit here and we just talk that we are on the rise, if we do not rise and control multilateral institutions, then we are not going to win this war. Right? We are not going to, in fact, we are not winning the war. People are just in ideology, just like Jason Arday. We're not different from our Jason Arday. No, we are intellectually dishonest. We are intellectually dishonest with ourselves. And that is why we too, metaphorically and physically, will die, just like Jason or Dave, because we're telling ourselves lies. We're lying to ourselves about Africa and what is happening there. But the people like them who live there, and they're conscious, they're letting us know that they can see that their leaders are also on board with what is happening right there on the continent of Africa. It's also happening here in the Caribbean, by the way, because we're not different. Our leaders are not different. They are fully on board with the global agenda, which is population control, or better called depopulation of the global population. Now, the WHO also plans to eliminate children in Africa. That is something that is also a part of the global agenda. And let me just say to you, the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations encompass all of what I'm talking about. So when you hear them talking about sustainability, they don't mean that they want you to have stronger economies, that they want you to have a rich future, a prosperous future. So when we're there too talking a lot about reparations, and we're not looking at these are the things we should be talking about, because at this point in time, nobody is going to give you any reparations for anything, right? Europeans don't give away money. You have to earn it as far as they're concerned, even though we earned it during slavery, but they're not going to give us any free money right now. No free lunch for African people or Caribbean people. So if you are there so much caught up with that distraction, then you're going to realize that when they come to depopulate you, you have nothing to say, right? And aren't we always taken off guard because we are never serious about true knowledge and confronting what is truth, even though it might be painful. So let us look at what the WHO agenda is.
Vaccination of our children against malaria. Yet malaria is a treatable disease. In fact, the herb that is being used, the trees that are being used to create quinine, which is one of the best medicines, especially where there is resistance, the trees are grown here in Congo. Artemisia afra, Artemisia annua, is a herb that treats malaria just from drinking the tea of the herb. These things are available to us. And with concerted effort, Africa can eradicate malaria without the help of WHO. Now, one of our doctors in Congo wrote a paper that demonstrated how well the Artemisia tea worked and compared it to conventional medicine, and even demonstrated it works better than conventional medicine. And 2 years later, his paper was pulled out. It was retracted. We do not need a vaccine for our children to treat for malaria.
So we are seeing where they are attacking the continent on multiple levels, right? So health-wise, sexual revolution, reproductive health, as they say, but it's reproductive destruction, right? It has nothing to do with health. It's actually reproductive destruction that they should say, because it is a destructive policy, and that means therefore that people won't be able to engage in population and trying to procreate as normal beings have done over the centuries. Now, Bill Gates is an interesting creature, right? And I want here to pull up on the screen something that he is saying that we must pay attention to, because they're no longer hiding their agenda, ladies and gentlemen. The agenda is open out there, but we are so distracted by what is happening in the world with reparations and the gossips that we are not able to look at exactly what they're saying. And that's why there was, in fact, the pandemic, if we were falling over the years, that was something not even strange. It was already predicted. We were the ones not following the predictions when the pandemic came upon us unaware, because we have always, as a people, been distracted by nonsense. So let's now get to what Bill Gates is saying, and he tends to speak openly and frankly. This is his population warning that he's giving. Let me see if that will come on my screen, and I will share it as soon as it is there. So let me get it here, there on the screen. And let us see what Mr. Bill Gates is saying, right? The scientist extraordinaire, as it were. So let me just turn up the volume. Let me go back to the beginning.
Kids' arms.
Can I go back to the beginning here? Oh, okay. Let me see if, okay. Wow.
On.
We might have to play twice because I'm not sure.
New vaccines. We could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Let's play it again.
We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein. First, we've got population. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
So Bill Gates is very sure, he's very clear, ladies and gentlemen, that he's going to reduce the world's population using vaccines and what? What he's going to use? He's going to be using vaccines and other things, right? That is what he's clear about. So we have to take him at his word, shouldn't we? Yes, we should. Now, we have to understand that these people are they're very, very courageous, and we are the ones who are not, because we're not speaking the truth, confronting the truth, but they know what the truth is. They enjoy their truth, but we find it to be painful because it's going to result in lots of pain and suffering by many of us, right? By many of us. Let's now look at this video. This guy, I think, did quite a comprehensive thing on the depopulation of Africa. I think this is, I probably should have made this my first video clip, but it's very good presentation.
Men from the continent of Africa, all over the world, something is about to happen. It has been cooked, it has been prepared, and a certain percentage of this fact and truth is already released. Africa has the youngest population on the planet Earth as of today. The median age for Africa is 19. Average age, 15 years old. Other continents, they are between the 30 and 50. The rate at which the fertility rate in Africa is about 40%. That means women in Africa and men in Africa has a high chances of giving birth to about 4 to 5 kids per family. And that puts Africa on a high level. And now the rest of the world, they are afraid of Africa taking over in few years to come because of this ever-growing population. And because of this, there is a theory that is being prepared right now, a system that is carefully planned right now to reduce Africa by 50% in population. And this is going to happen by introducing so many things into Africa continent, into the continent of Africa. And how are they going to do it? One of the ways that this thing is going to happen is by introducing the powdered elements into the continent of Africa. And so that Africans, the young population of Africa, will start taking the powder. You know what I mean? They will start taking it to mess up their system, to distract them, and to make them to look down on themselves and to take away their dignity and their respect and their focus and their purpose. And the next phase of this plan, according to what I got, is that billions of dollars is going to be injected into the continent of Africa, and especially through Nigeria. By 2027, billions of dollars are going to be poured into the country and into the continent. And instead of the leaders, from government, governors to the presidency, and all the heavy leaders in Africa, instead of them to focus on the vision and the dream for building their countries, they are going to be carried away by the amount of money that will be coming their way. And outside of that, there are people that are in the private sector that are also going to be heavily lobbied. Money is going to be poured into their system. And indirectly, they are going to hold them to the truth. And they are going to demand that they should do some certain things. Food industry, watch out, because something big is also coming for you in the agricultural sector. A lot of foods are going to be affected by the next level, and is part of the plan that they're planning right now. That is why it is dangerous for Africa to depend on importation of agricultural material from anywhere in the world. Not even China wants Africa to surpass them. America does not want Africa to surpass them. Asia doesn't want Africa to surpass them. But the thing is, the population, Africa population, keep growing rapidly beyond control. And in the medical field, a lot of men and women that travel outside of the country for medical reasons, a lot of things are going to be shipped into your system. That when you return back home, you will no longer be able to do what you have been doing. One end, they are trying to solve your health situation. Another end, they are trying to cut your lineage. Kids born outside of Africa, system, they are not going to be safe anymore. Am I pointing finger to any particular country? No. But this is what the system that has been planned in the secret place is going to do to Africa, to reduce the population to about 60 to 50%. And that's why we must, as a matter of fact and with a sense of urgency, start building things that we have control over in Africa. It doesn't matter how small, it doesn't matter how little. If you don't have control over your food and what you put in your body, then you are submitting yourself to this plan. If we cannot control our health sector, we're submitting ourselves to this plan. If we cannot control what we drive, we are submitting ourselves to this plan. This plan is intentionally and deliberately want to reduce Africa to the size of other continents, and so that the best brain in Africa will not be able to perform anymore. And another of this plan is that everyone that has good intention of doing anything great in Africa is going to eventually be bought over to shut their mouth. And many mouths that you are hearing today are going to be shut between 2027 and 2028. Some of the voices that are loud in the continent of Africa, looking for a way to put Africa in the best position, they are going to be muted. They are going to be shut. They are not going to be loud again. People are going to be bought over through political parties, through business deal, and they are going to keep quiet. And that is why we, Africa Human Capacity Development, we are of the opinion and understanding that we must move into this market called Africa to bring this knowledge and awareness to Africans. Because if we are able to build a good number of people, millions of people, and give them the template of success, then even no matter what they do out there, we're still going to be able to achieve the dream of building Africa. I've got a lot of things to share, but not everything that we can put out here on the internet. Not everything. Some people know exactly what I'm talking about. There are people that knows exactly what I'm talking about. I know how many messages I receive every single day because of what I'm even saying about the content of Africa. I receive a lot of messages. But you see, if we don't stand for the truth to build the continent, no one else is going to happen. What I'm saying to you today, I want you to save this video, send it to your local government chairman, send it to your governor, send it to your president, Send it to government officials, because what is coming, money cannot save Africa. Money won't be able to save Africa. Individual wealth will not be able to save Africa. If we are not ready to sell Africa, it is time for us to spread this news and let it get to every single person so that we can watch out. We need to go into agriculture and start producing our own food. If not, we are submitting ourselves to reducing and causing ourselves problems that are unimaginable. I said, let me come forth today, Sunday, and let this out. Those who have ears, let them hear. Those who have ears, let them hear what I'm saying to the continent of Africa. Hit the plus button. Follow me for more, because we have a lot that is coming. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard. It has not entered into the imagination of men what is about to happen. But we have been given the revelation, the secret code to know what I'm sharing with you right now. If you believe in Africa, leave me a comment in the comment section. Let us have a conversation about this. God bless you.
So, yeah, so we have seen these things. We've heard from the Europeans, we're hearing from the Africans what is really happening, and we are seeing where this is a very serious and real agenda that they are planning, in fact, to reduce the African population because they think the African population is a threat. One, they want to control the resources. People sit on the resources of Africa. So in order to have the resources, they have to uproot the people in terms of reducing significantly, dramatically, the continent's population. But some people are not taking them seriously. We are more now engaged in very empty conversations about reparations when the same people who are telling us that we're getting reparations are the same people who are planning and executing that agenda. The same people from whom you're hearing about reparations are the same people who form the National Commission of Reparations. They are a part of the same agenda, and the two here cannot coexist. You cannot love Africans at the same time you want to get rid of them. That cannot be logical, but that is what you think, because most of us do not think logically anyway, do we? Now, let's get to some other important information regarding this agenda, because this agenda is something that is brewing and it will be executed very soon, if it is not being executed as we speak. Now, let's look at, I think I've looked at the depopulation in Africa and by Bill Gates, right? I think I might have, yes, I think I looked at that one before. Let's that one I had on the screen before. So let's look at something else where Bill Gates is actually, because he's on the agenda, he's using health as the excuse to depopulate Africa. Now, we look at depopulation, we're looking at depopulation and the African thing. Dr. Umar Johnson is also chiming in on the conversation, and he also agrees that, the whole sexual revolution is one of the ploys that they'll be using to decrease.
Got people like Bill Gates, the United Nations, the Rockefeller Foundation that come into Africa and fund family planning programs that deliberately seek to reduce the population of African people. That's one of the biggest reasons for LGBTQ. That's one of the biggest reasons for LGBTQ. And I'm not against no homosexual or no lesbian. I love all African people, but I reserve the right to disagree with any lifestyle that threatens the survival of the traditional African family. LGBTQ is the new birth control pill. Why do I say that? 2 men cannot reproduce. 2 women cannot reproduce. And now they're even transgenderizing our children. Do you know what that means? They're manipulating and indoctrinating African children to undergo sexual surgery so they'll never be able to reproduce again. When Dwayne Wade, whose son is now legally had his birth certificate changed. He's legally a girl.
Yeah.
Hormone therapy. When he gets 30 years old and looks in the mirror and says, you know what? I don't like living like this no more. I want to go back to being what God made me, a man. I want to get a wife and I want to have children. We only got one problem, don't we? Your reproductive is gone. We got another problem. Your testosteronic levels are gone. Your ability to produce healthy seed is gone. There is no going back. We are not looking at this LGBTQ thing the way we should be looking at it. It is birth control and racial extermination. Why you think Kamala Harris is traveling throughout Africa, trying to convince African countries to legalize gay marriage. Why does America care how Africa chooses to run its society? What do you care about marriage in Africa? Because if we can invade African culture to the point where we can manipulate African children into same-sex relationships or outright transgenderism, which is the extermination of your bloodline, we can start predicting the reduction of the African population. They'll never be able to get rid of all African people, but they can damn sure make a dent in our numbers. But more than that, they can disrupt the natural, traditional, healthy, cultural way that we live our lives, build our families, and run our societies. LGBTQ is one of the greatest weapons of white supremacy against the survival of African people.
Right. So who practices that? Because when the Democrats are in power, people tend to be very comfortable with them, right? It's only Trump. Trump is the enemy. The Democrats are not the enemy. And they were the ones who were pushing forward some of the agenda, the sexual agendas that he's speaking about. The very Democratic Party. We spoke about Jason R. Day, who was this black, professor at the University of Cambridge. We have looked at the deceit that he has used. And similarly, the Democratic Party and the left in the West here, they use a lot of those race baiting with many, and many black people fall for it. Many black people fall for it. In fact, if you look at the social media right now, you'll see that people are clamoring for Kamala Harris. Hope she's going to win again. In fact, some people are even hoping that Barack Hussein Obama, that President Trump will change the whole election, policies and allow Obama. He would probably run against Obama, and they're hoping that Obama will win again, because somehow they think Obama was this great president and that Kamala Harris would have made an excellent president. Even though all of them, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, all of them have been very, very hostile toward Haiti and also to other African countries and to black people in general. Yet still, we are so much proud of our black heritage when we are so much conflicted in terms of who to vote for. And we tend to be very subjective when it comes to looking at the system as a whole. We tend to be very subjective when we need to look, and that is a lack of critical thinking, a lack of critical awareness. If you can't look at leaders as a whole, and stop saying that they are mighty and that they're righteous, and you're pitting one against the other, and that is how they are winning the battle. That is how and I think we're living maybe in the darkest, is one of the darkest periods in our history, in human history. We think we're modern. We think we have exposure to lots of information. The information is out there, but there's just too much noise. There is too much noise, and we are not paying attention to substantive things and try to say, even though I don't like the reality is upsetting, it's painful, but I have to accept that this is the reality. And that is what the Chinese guy was saying on Jimmy Dore's show. He said that many people are going to die because of lack of information and their resistance to accepting the truth. We don't want to accept the truth. We want to live in this world, this utopia, thinking that black people are just going to rise magically when we see everything is stacked against us. And this is not just a regional country like it's the West versus Africa. This is the entire world. The entire world is a global agenda that is against this continent. Now, it's going to be against everybody too eventually, but they're starting with us. And we have to now get our acts together and to sound the alarm to let people know that we are in danger. We are in danger, and stop listening to intellectual seats of power where they're telling us about, we are mighty and we were kings and queens in history. Yes, we might have been, but the fact of the matter, we are no longer kings and queens right now. Okay? We are no longer kings and queens right now. And we've got to admit that fact. We've got to now come to grips with that fact and say that what we're seeing in Africa right now is exactly the same thing happening in the Caribbean region, where leaders have been bought and sold, and they would rather line off their pockets with money than standing up for that which is right, even though you might not be popular. Because let me tell you something, truth does not attract popularity. If people are speaking truth, they will never be popular. People tend to be popular when they are speaking propaganda. And that is what you've got to understand, because it wheels people into a feel-goodism. They want to feel good about themselves, because if the reality is too dim, it's too dark. So it's best if I listen to someone that is going to tell me what I really want to hear. That Africa and these Caribbean countries are going to rise, even though we're not doing anything. There's no vision. And where there is no vision, the people what? Perish. And that is what is happening in Africa right now. We don't have any visionary leaders. We don't have leaders who are willing to call a spade a spade. So we find ourselves in this precarious position in which the global elites, because they're also working with them, the African leaders are working with the global elites. And that's why I'm telling you, when you come on this platform and say white and black and just talk about it in general, it means absolutely nothing. Because lots of our black people, particularly our elites, are on board with a white European, whatever global agenda. It might not even be white. It is a global agenda because they belong to institutions and secret societies and so forth. And these are the agendas that they have, whether we like it or not. I will say it, though the heavens fall. Okay, so we are seeing, guys and gentlemen, for those of you who are joining, we're looking at the agenda to depopulate Africa. And that has been an agenda that has been going on for years, right? This is nothing new. What is very, very sad now, and we can see it, is that they're no longer hiding. They're no longer hiding this agenda. They're telling us that this is what we are going to do, and what are you going to do about it? Rather than sit down in your things and go on podcasts and you run around seeing that Africa is rising and you think that Africa is going to bring you some sort of liberation soon. It's not going to do it if you are not doing anything and if you're not aware of these things. And what is your agenda? What is your plan to combat Africa's depopulation agenda? What is your plan to combat these crises, right? This agenda, you have none. All you can say is, wow, Africa is going to liberate us and our freedom lies in Africa. All right. Yesterday, I was listening to a video, I'm sorry I didn't bring it here, in which this young man from Jamaica was questioning the Rastafarians, because Rastafarians, according to him, were revolutionary, used to be revolutionaries, right? Now he's realizing that they're on board with the agendas of the world. Right? He's realizing that Rastafarians are no longer revolutionaries. When you listen to Muta Baruka, I've never trusted Muta Baruka, but when you listen to him, he has nothing revolutionary in his message. He's just chatting about Africa, and what is happening right now. He's not going to be saying, he's not going to say these things, right? And put them in proper perspective and context. Right? They're all about the superficial thoughts and ideologies that make them feel good and that don't challenge the system. And then we find ourselves in the position that we find ourselves in. So this was very interesting. Let me see what some of you are saying before we might end the live. We have CV Desi saying those vaccines, right? And yes, we're seeing the vaccines were the ones that they use. Bill Gates is very clear that he'll be using vaccines and reproductive, policies, like birth controls, both birth control and everything and other things to control Africa's population. And they've already doing it, pandemics, measles, all these diseases. He's going to be using them and saying that they're necessary to help African people when they are not. And as the African doctor said, there are herbs in Africa that Africans can use, but they are not so much knowledgeable of that. Okay? And for all of our doctors and our scientists and our pharmacists, you will also have to educate yourselves independently. You can't think that the system that you've gone through is the system that has educated you, because it has not. Okay, you've got to now look at other means of curing, helping to cure. You should know both the allopathy and the naturopathy. Make sure you know both. Don't think that the naturopathy is the standard, because it's not the standard. They've made it into the standard, but they're using it and weaponizing it against us. So until we know that, and we can say, go away, Bill Gates, because we don't need your vaccines, we don't need your drugs, We have natural herbs here in Africa, on the continent, so we can cure our people. But if we don't have a knowledge of these things, how are we going to be curing our people? We're going to have to rely on his medication. And that's the same thing we do with our economy, right? We rely on their economic policies because we think without their economic policies of GDP and the standards and benchmarks that they have set for us, we think without that. And by the way, neoliberalism is a religion. And for those of you who are anti-religion, that's what they're using on you right now. Neoliberalism is a religion. It's a secular religion. And they have even said that by themselves, by the way. All right. So the same people that you think are just in the secular world, they are imposing a religious economic ideology on you. And that is why we're talking about GDP and tourism and all of the foolishness we talk about here in the Caribbean. And we think that these are benchmarked to be used in our economy and to grow, when it's not growing us. It's actually what? It's actually destroying our economies. And my God, can't we see that? This has been happening for years. And still we continue to do the same things. We implement the same policies. And year after year, I think we're mentally ill. And much of it has to do with the education system. Because if the education system had taught people to think, then my God, don't you see that these policies are not working? Don't you see that Africa is not rising? Right? And don't tell me now because you see something on social media and 2 big houses here and there. That's what they, in Jamaica, for example, I see that happening. Oh, they show us some nice houses here and there, or 2 people who are actually, in a business and they're doing well. And that is the standard. That is the standard. The standard is not the majority are not doing well, That is not the standard you're using. The standard is a few people doing well. Oh, Jamaica is a dreamland. Right? We have the Jamaica dream because a few people have good houses and they own them and they're living well there. But what about the majority of people? What is their stance? And everybody does the same thing and they say the same words and they show the same videos. And are you not tired of that? When are we going to wake up as a people to understand that we're listening and doing the same thing? Even our language, sometimes I'm on the chat with some of you and the language and everything is the same. It's boring. Let's now get to understand that we have to speak differently. We've got to think differently. And that means independent thinking. And no matter what people gossip about you or say about you, speak the truth. Because at the end of the day, only the truth will liberate, whether people like you or not. And many of us don't have the moral courage to speak and to articulate the truth. We don't want to do it because we're going to lose our friends, we lose our views, right? But what is going to happen when everything tumbles down on you? Who's going to save you? And what peace are you going to have in your heart that you did the best thing you could do when you had the freedom to declare what was truth? Because I'm telling you, very soon, we cannot speak as we're speaking on this platform and many others. And some of you already are doing it. Some of you are even reporting me to YouTube, and I know that. Right? Some of you are already doing that. Don't think I'm not seeing what is happening behind the scenes. I know what's happening. Right? But the thing about it is that I'm not going to resist speaking what is truth, because truth is the only liberation factor that we have in the world. Now, let's look at this another good afternoon. And we have Eric Prince, Blackwater, Haiti said, revolutionize. Yes, and what is Eric Prince is a person who believes in genocide. And he wants to get rid of lots of Black people. And that is why he was sent to Haiti. We know what he did in the Middle East, right? So these are things that we have to begin to discuss and stop talking about reparations, which we are not going to get. If we're going to have, if we were going to get it, then yeah, we could talk about it all. But if we're not going to get any reparations, right? They're using the word reparations because it's a part of the climate change agenda, and the climate change agenda is linked to depopulation, by the way. The climate change agenda is linked to the global agenda to depopulate the world. As the man was saying at the World Economic Forum, he said that ants and plants are not the enemies. The people, he said, if you should have an ant, right, who died tomorrow, whatever, which dies tomorrow, the environment will be impacted. But he says that if people should die tomorrow, the environment would prosper or will prosper. That is what he said, not my words, his words. And he was at the World Economic Forum, a very important global institution that sets policies for nations around the world. Okay, but how many of us know that these things are happening? Or do we not want to know? You know, there's a book I read, for example, on American imperialism. And, you know, the author opened up his book by saying, many Americans do not want to know. They don't know, and they don't want to know that their country is a global imperium. They don't want to know that. Because all they want to know is they get up every morning and do the same banal tasks, complete the same banal tasks, nothing new, shop till you drop, and think that life is going to continue like that. And that is boring. That is not going to lift you. That is actually destroying your ability to think and to critically analyze what is happening in the world. Okay? It is. So let us think about it, because this is real and it's going to happen. Just like the pandemic happened and they implemented those very dangerous and toxic, you know, policies, we will have to deal with this depopulation agenda, which really technically has begun, right? Many of us, we take their drugs, we take whatever they give to us. That is what we have to use as a cure. We don't want to find out other means of curing a disease. Everything has to be a drug, because that is what I learned in school. And I'm educated, so I should know, right? That is how we talk, because we are following in the same footsteps of the white people. Even though we don't like them, we claim we don't like the white man. At the same time, everything the white man does, that is what we follow. Why do you think Jason R.D. did what he did? He was following the white man. He wanted to be popular. He wanted to be famous, and he lied, and they used him, spat him out of their mouths, and now he is what? Dead. Dead. That's end of the story. And they don't care, because the powers that be are making lots of money from you having used him. But you're there crying, racism, it's racism, and they killed my brother. But you're not saying that Jason R.D. had what? Agency, and could have resisted and could have said he's not going to do it. But he decided to do it because he wanted money and power. He wanted money and fame, even though he knew a lot of what they said about him were lies. Okay? And our politicians are the same. They're doing the same thing. They're being also exalted and promoted. The Mia Motleys, and they're known around the world. But for what? For what? And at whose expense? They're not representing you. They're not representing you. They're representing their colonial masters. And you listen to them because they are the politicians, because they are your colonial masters. Okay? When are we going to think? When are we going to rise up and begin to think as a global populace? I think, ladies and gentlemen, that much of what is going to happen to us, we deserve it. We certainly deserve it. We are not much better than our leaders. Why? We also don't like the truth. And somehow we want to live in a reality that is not real. We want to be comfortable knowing that somebody's fighting for freedom, and we can sit down, listen to a podcast, eat some food, laugh, party until we die. That is what Black people really is about, enjoying yourselves. Enjoying yourselves until the trials and the tribulation come, and you begin to sing the spirituals, wade in the water, and then you mock God. Oh God, you're evil. Right? Because you want to do what you want to do. right? And then when the consequences follow, I didn't know. And you blame your leaders when you had the opportunity of studying, being informed, but you don't want to study. You don't want to be informed. You want to be entertained. You want to be entertained with drama and gossips. That's exactly what you want. And I will say that until I die too, because that is exactly what you want. And some of you come here, you want the gossips too, and I look at your sentence and I know who you're sent by and what you are doing. Okay? So we need now to get our acts together. We need to focus. We need to show that we have some intellect as the other races. And that is what Marcus Garvey was very, very poignant with his words. He was very upright. He was saying that he does not want any black person who is weak, who has a weak mind, to go back to Africa. Because he knows that many of us here, our minds are weak. And I don't want to hear about, it's black and white and all of that nonsense, when most of us are not really better than the white people that we talk about or talk against. We're not better. We're not better. And that is why we live in the situation in which we live now, because we, like the politicians, are, to a large extent, and it's very sad to say that, evil. Evil intentions, evil motives, and only if we were in power, we would do the same thing. But we criticize them because we are not in power. So we have that luxury of speaking out against them. But were we to get there, the same with Jason Arday. I would never lie. And if you had gotten a chance to go to Oxford or go to Cambridge and they presented that trap to you that, just come and we'll put your DEI and make you a big, wonderful intellectual into a world famous intellectual, even though you haven't achieved it, you haven't really earned it, you would do it. You'd do it, right? Because that is how the human mind is framed and is designed. The natural human mind, right? Hypocrites. We like to look at the body. I don't like Mayor Motley. I don't like Andrew Holness. At the same time, were we to be in their position and the sort of temptation that they have to get money and fame and wealth, do the same thing, right? Because we love that sort of in Western institution. We tend to talk against it, but we love it. We love it. And the love of money is the root of all evil. So when you think that these politicians and these people like Bill Gates are thinking like you do, and they're not going to even bat an eye if 1 million people die in Africa. They're not going to bat an eye. They're going to laugh. It's a joke to them. All right? Now, this is some serious stuff, and you don't understand it. And when you're there going on podcasts and you're raving against Bill Gates, the more you rave against him is the more he's going to do evil. Because that is what he was sent there to do. And he's protected by these people. So when you think that this is something, wow, and you can stop them by shouting and carrying on and you have 1 million people on the podcast, these guys don't, because they realize you don't even know what's going on. Right? You don't even know what is really happening, and that these people are linked to some powerful forces behind the scenes. So what are we going to do? Are we going to sit down and say Africa, 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 and one day Africa liberation? I think it's too late. I think that we've wasted our time. Marcus Garvey came how many years ago? And he told us that we can never integrate with these people because they're not going to solve our problems. We've got to be independent. We've got to be resourceful. We've got to be self-reliant. No. I want to be popular. I want to be on the BBC. I want to work for Wall Street. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and they told me that one of their children, whatever, grandchildren, is now at one of these very important school in Virginia, state, elite school. And only most of the population there is white. because we love to be near to the white man or the white woman, because they represent a symbol of success. Yet we love the success and we blame them while we are using the success for our own good and not for the good of the whole. We like to talk like we love Black people, but we hate ourselves. We hate ourselves. Self-hate is a big thing in the Black community. And that is why Africa, the Caribbean, are in the positions in which we find ourselves. We just don't want to hear the reality. We just want to be at the next party. And if we can be at the next sound system party and we can enjoy ourselves, that is the goal. And we should have our leaders face the sort of what challenges by themselves, right? And they'll take care of us. Andrew Holness will take care of Jamaica. Miss Mia Motley will take care of Barbados. Let her do the job. And while we sit down and just, uninformed, uneducated, have titles. Yeah, we have lots of degrees in the Caribbean, lots of PhDs and lots of masters and lots of bachelors, but uneducated. Uneducated. You can't have a discussion here about politics because outside of the drama, there's no discussion to be had. You can't have a discussion about religion in this because there's nothing that can be had because you don't know anything. Right? You just went to school, you memorized some facts, what you think are the facts, by the way, but you don't know how to critically assess what you call the facts. And facts are not necessarily truth. Facts have to also be analyzed and critiqued. But you don't want to do it. You don't want to do that. Oh, it's too much. And that is an established truth. Everybody knows that the vaccines are 100%, effective, right? And that's what it is, irrefutable evidence, right? That is what comes from our institutions. That is what comes from what you think. You go, it's blind religion, by the way. You don't know that, but that is blind religion. Okay? And that is why we have to credit Marcus Garvey, because he wasn't a man to just talk. He was also a man to act. So whatever he said, the man was flawed, yes. And I'm sure he made mistakes just like any other man, but you have to credit him for his uncanny ability to actually say what he says and try to put his theories into practice, which many of these Pan-Africanists and people who talk about Black people can't do. They can't even run a chicken coop. Many of them cannot even manage a chicken coop, but they're telling us that they love Black people. And some of them come on the program and they're telling you that, you don't like Black people. Liking Black people and telling them the truth are two distinct things. If you love them, you must tell them the truth. If Black people at Cambridge loved Jason Arday, they would have told him the truth. But they didn't like him. At least the ones who didn't talk to him didn't like him. Because had they liked him, had they loved him, they would have said, look here, brother, what you're doing is wrong. Is wrong. But how many of us have that moral courage to do that? We'll just like to sit down and say, yeah, it's a Black man. Let him have his white people do it too. So why can't Black people do it? Because the standard is ever low for us. Our standards must be judged in terms of what the white man and the white woman do. And we talk about them so often. Where is our agency? If we don't have any agency, we are in fact inferior. If you are going to blame the white man every day and the white woman, and yet you say that you're kings and queens, then what are you? You have no agency. Everything that happens in your life is a white man or the white woman. And we're not suggesting that they're not some nefarious people. But if we are also, joined with them, our leaders are also on board with their agenda, how can we just blame them alone when our leaders and our economic elites are also in bed with them? And we are part of the education system that they have crafted right here in the West. So when we say that we're educated, are we really educated? Because we are educate according to Western standards. Right? You mope against religion, but you don't mope against the politics and the education system that you have inherited. Oh, it's Western Christianity. It's a Western religion. The education system that you are part of is also Western. The political system that you are part is also Western. The economic system that you hold so dearly is also Western. The clothes that you wear is also Western. Why don't you give them up? Right? Why don't you give them up? Why are you just attacking that it's only Christianity or probably another religion that is Western? Right? Because you have selective attention. Right? You cannot reason from cause to effect. Right? And understand that we too in the West, Black people, African peoples, have also created and helped to call what we call a new Western civilization right here. Right? We helped. So we are also Western. Okay? We're also Western. Now, we can accept and we can criticize things that need to be criticized, but we can't detach ourselves from a system that we are a part of, and that also has shaped and molded us, including the very education and the way of thinking that you do. Notice here that one of the clips, the African brother was saying that in Africa, people believe in polygamy. They believe you can have many women. They believe you can have many men. And he says that if he had more money, he would have more women. Now, how many of Caribbean women or women in the Western Hemisphere would believe that? Because we know how you guys behave when, oh, somebody's cheating. But that is that's the African, yeah. Polygamy is a religion. It's a part of their religion and their cultural thing, and that is what they adhere to. But oh no, I don't like Christianity. So why do you want to have just one wife or one husband? Why don't you believe in polygamy? Are you thinking? And I'm sometimes wondering, because before I left the system, the education system, I really thought that it was going on the wrong path. But now you can see, even of my generation, that many of us are miseducated, and that the direction in which they were moving, years ago, from the 1990s onward, we are now reaping the whirlwind. So when many people say that they are educated and they're smart and they can reason, they can't. They can't, right? Because our minds are filled up with a lot of empty stuff, superficial stuff. And all we can see is some utopia, some or sentiments, utopic sentiments, that Africa is on the rise, Jamaica is on the rise, Barbados is on the rise, when we are not on the rise. Because the reality of these countries or the continent of Africa do not say that we are on the rise. What we're seeing are, these foreign people coming and buying land and taking over our properties, buying up the resources, extracting the resources. Okay? And we're still rising. Because we see some buildings going up and they look nice. Some roads going up and they look nice, even though you have to pay huge tolls. Somebody was in Panama, a Jamaican in Panama, said that she was riding from Colón in Panama to, I think that's with the Panama City. And she said that on that highway, which Panama is a bigger country than Jamaica is, she only had to pay $2.50 one way. Okay? In Jamaica, she says, on a similar toll, perhaps on the northwest, whatever toll, you have to pay $20, the equivalent of $20, in a small country the size of Jamaica. It suggests to you that we are in problem here. We're in problem. But we don't want to think that way because we love the highways and we don't think that, it's beautiful. We're developing. And that's how slaves think, by the way. And that's why in the region here, we're slaves. We're slaves. We are slaves. And Africa is not better. Well, I must say, Haiti is the only country in the region, and that's why it's in the position that it is in right now. Anytime you speak the truth, Anytime you resist, when you are courageous, you have to suffer the consequences. And Haiti is paying the consequences for standing up. Because we in the region don't want to stand up. We want to have our cake and eat it at the same time. We want to be in bed with the corrupt system, yet be developed tomorrow. Oh, no, the IMF is not doing anything. Oh, that is economics and it's complex, it's complicated. You think you're right. When has corruption and what do you call it now, and lies become the norm? And we use these terms complicated because it's a lie, right? It's a lie. It's corruption, but we don't want to call it by its name. So we have to sound intellectual even when we are not, right? Well, I leave you to think about what we have discussed in this afternoon's program. I hope that you will do some deep reflection, because Africa is certainly not on the rise, right? It's actually dying. It's actually dying. And it's not dying because Africa is inherently weak. It's inherently inferior. It is because the people, like in the Caribbean, that inhabit that space are distracted. We are distracted. And we're using lies and half-truths and propaganda to fill us up, to feel that something good one day is going to happen. Even though we can see, if you can think, if you have eyes to see, and if you can perceive with any level of depth, you would see that Africa is not rising. You'd see the Caribbean is not rising. You can see that African Americans in the United States are also not rising. We have regressed, and we are regressing, not only economically, but culturally too. Culturally too. It's despicable to see how we behave as a people. And I'm sure that Marcus Garvey and these people would have, and the CLR James would have been highly disappointed in where we are now as a people. We can't even find a good person who can stand up and speak, the unvarnished truth, as these men would attempt to do. We can't find anybody in that right now as highly intellectual as they were in their times. None. What has happened? Right? Africa, the same thing. Caribbean, the same thing. So the ball is in our courts. Is either we accept the truth or reject it. But when the agenda is fully implemented, don't cry. And you have no podcasts on which to go, no lives on which to go and register your discontent, because they will shut you down, and you have no way of even challenging what they have done and what they will do, and the half has not yet even been told. It's scary, and the half yet still has not been told. So what is going to happen when the full anger of all of what they have planned for the continent and for people in general across the world will be unveiled, will be unpackaged? What will you do? I hope that, I don't know what you'll do, but I think it's now time for you to think seriously, to think profoundly about the future, because the future is not pretty. It's grim. However, the only way we might avoid some of the pitfalls and the dangers of the future is if we accept the truth, though it is painful. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like and you'll share and you will subscribe to the channel. Okay, so we'll have another one as soon as we can make it. So thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.